Welcome to the Fast Leader Podcast, where we uncover the leadership life hacks that help you to experience breakout performance faster and rocket to success. And now, here's your host, customer and employee engagement expert and certified emotional intelligence practitioner, Jim Rimbach.
Call Center Coach develops and unites the next generation of call center leaders. Through our e-learning and community, individuals gain knowledge and skills in the 6 core competencies that is the blueprint that develops high-performing call center leaders. Successful supervisors do not just happen. So go to callcentercoach.com to learn more about enrollment and download your copy of the Supervisor Success Path ebook now. Okay, Fast Leader Legion, today I'm excited because we have somebody on the show today who has a wealth of experience in doing one of the things that, I guess you should say the thing, that is top of mind for a lot of leaders in organizations, quite frankly, at all levels, and that is getting to results. Sean Ryan grew up in Hamilton, Ohio, just outside Cincinnati. He has 2 older sisters and played a variety of sports as a kid. That love of sports eventually led to his future adventures, including backpacking, whitewater canoeing, biking, boating, sailing, and golf. His family instilled the values of integrity, respect, and hard work to achieve success. He was inspired to pursue an engineering degree in his early teenage years when one of his sisters took him to a computer lab where he got to play Pong on an ancient cathode ray TV monitor. That engineering degree, combined with his passion for whitewater, led him to his first corporate role in technical sales at Pacific Gas and Electric, PG&E, in California. Sean had a variety of sales, marketing, and engineering roles at PG&E, while he also obtained his MBA at night school. While at PG&E, he had the opportunity to work with a lot of great, talented people who were often stifled in their efforts to perform their best. This led to Sean discovering what has become his lifelong passion and mission to create great organizations where everyone can contribute their best. The first step in that mission was to join a small boutique consulting firm headquartered in the San Francisco area. He essentially had been on that mission for the last 30 years, including a couple of significant sabbaticals from his consulting practice. In the first, he served as the Vice President of Learning and Organizational Development for Pierre Group of America, now Nestle Waters North America, as it experienced exponential growth. Sean and his team helped shape the culture and build the talent pipeline that enabled their growth. In the second sabbatical, Sean led the turnaround of Callaway Gardens as the Chief Operating Officer and General Manager. Sean and his team revitalized the guest experience, re-engaged the Callaway team, and turned the resort from significantly negative cash flow to positive cash flow in less than 18 months. Sean's consulting firm, WhiteWater International Consulting, works with organizations from startups to Fortune 100-sized companies to create the strategy, drive strategy to results, and develop the leadership capacity to engage teammates in a rapidly changing environment fully. His book, Get in Gear, The 7 Gears That Drive Strategy to Results, translates his thinking into practical guidance to enable both organization and individuals to achieve success. Sean is a member of the board of Fundy Gymnastics, and he regularly speaks, writes, and blogs about creating and executing strategy and leadership. Sean currently lives outside St. John, New Brunswick, Canada, with his spouse, Heather, and their son, Aiden. Sean also has 2 gainfully employed adult children living in the U.S. Sean Ryan, are you ready to help us get over the hump?
Jim, absolutely. Much looking forward to it today.
Well, I'm glad you're here. Now, I've given you actually, in the bio, we talked a little bit about your passion, but if you can, elaborate on that a little bit to give us, the Fast Leader Legion, a little bit more about you.
Sure. And so to provide just a little bit of context, my absolute passion is my family and hanging out with them and spending time with them however I can. But then secondly, thinking about organizations and this Don Quixotic mission that I started 33 some odd years ago around creating great organizations where people can be their best, and then how's that manifest itself? Well, it manifests itself in those 3 things that you talked about in the bio: creating strategy, and then driving strategy to results, because having great strategy and not executing on it is completely pointless. And then the things that it takes to make that happen is to build agile, nimble leaders who engage their teams in driving forward on the strategy and on driving forward on execution. Now, the part on driving strategy to results we captured in the book Get in Gear. And today, I would say that's probably my most passionate thing, is to kind of share our thinking and get as many people thinking along with us and driving strategy to results in their organizations, because it has so many implications for the health of the organization, the health of those organizations' relationship with their customers, and the health of the relationship with the team members that actually make that happen.
Well, and as you're saying that, I start thinking about, what I found in the book. And there's one particular part that's in the foreword that I think is really a core fundamental element. And that is, how Art Schmuck, who was the retired CEO of FedEx Supply Chain, state that when you were doing work with him, one of the things that you did was to help people understand how to think, not what to think. So if you can elaborate on that a little bit.
Sure. And you'll hear this theme probably intertwined in everything we talk about today. But most of what we really want to accomplish is driven by the thinking, the mental models, the assumptions, the beliefs, the perceptions that lay behind the actions that we take. And one of the things that we've discovered and has really just been ingrained in everything that we do is, how do we help leaders, how do we help people understand their own thinking? What are those assumptions, those beliefs, those perceptions that determine the actions that I take, which then get to the results that I'm trying to get to? And is there a different way of thinking? Is there a different assumption, a different belief, a different perception that might change? Let me give you a really simple example. When I look at somebody, and do I perceive that I trust them, or do I perceive that I don't trust them? Well, making that simple thing, making that simple distinction changes how my conversation is going to go with that person. If I don't trust them, or if I perceive that they don't trust me, I'm going to be way more guarded than I might be look, I believe we've got an incredibly open and trusting relationship, and it's well founded upon the respect that we've built over some period of time. Well, I'm gonna approach that conversation incredibly differently. And because I approach it differently, we're going to end up with a different set of results. So when we talk about teaching people how to think, it's because I can't tell you what to think. You're going to make your own decisions. Those decisions do have consequences. But if I can help you just expose those mental models and see your own thinking for what it is, essentially teaching you how to think, well, that arms you to make maybe a different, more explicit decision about how you think, what you think, which leads to those different decisions, which may lead to a very different set of outcomes.
Well, and as you're saying that, to me, it's like that, what you just described right there is really the elements as to why you state that 75 to 90% of organizations fall short at achieving the results they expect from the strategies. It's not about having bad strategies, because you state that most oftentimes they're pretty solid.
Right.
Execution piece. But is it really, so if we don't have this, is this part of what you call the doom loop?
Well, it is, right? And so you think about, let's operate on the premise for a second that I've got a good strategy, that I've thought carefully through how we create unique value for our customers, and it's distinct and different from what our competition does. So we've got good strategy, but then I don't execute. So what happens? If I don't execute well, and we saw this, you referenced the work at Callaway Gardens when we were doing the turnaround there. They had kind of gotten into this doom loop, and it's representative, I think, of what a lot of organizations go through. You've got a strategy, you don't execute it well, you don't create the value for your customers that they're anticipating. You erode the value of your brand, you don't generate the revenues. Quite possibly, your costs for service are higher than they should be, because you haven't built that relationship with your customers. You're not executing effectively on the brand, on the promise, on your positioning in the marketplace. Well, now that erodes your financial balance sheet, right? And your financial performance. You may be doing things, and frankly, if we're not doing a great job executing with our customers, there's probably a really good chance we're not executing well with our team. We're not engaging our team the way that they need to be engaged to be as effective as possible. That may actually cause some of them to defect, the better or the even good team members maybe can't contribute their best day in and day out. So now we've got this reinforcing loop of, our team's not in a position to win. They're not executing effectively with our customers because we don't have the right system structures, processes, or whatever else. We're not aligned on what we're supposed to be accomplishing. Financially, we don't perform as well, which then reinforces we can't make enough investment in our organization, in our team, to invest in our customers. Now we get a little bit worse. Now we're on the doom loop. And even in the best of times, if you're not taking care of what I call the balance sheet, the three balance sheets, the balance sheet with your customers and the relationship there, the balance sheet with your team and the relationship there, and certainly the financial balance sheet for your organization, even in the best of times, you're creating risk that you can't adapt and change when circumstances change. We can't adapt to the environment. Then you layer onto it things like the pandemic with COVID that was cataclysmic for everybody. And now you're just not, you don't have the financial strength to be able to weather yourself through those kind of storms.
Okay. So as you're talking, for me, it's like, we need like some guidance to get out of the doom loop. Cause I kind of visually see us just kind of spinning around. Right. And really that's what this book is about. It's about the SXR framework. And I think that's really important to say framework because in the book you state that, hey, this isn't checklist stuff. No, right. It's going to be unique for everyone. So what we need is actually a framework to work within. So if you can explain to us a little bit about what the SXR framework is.
Sure. And so SXR stands for strategy, execution, results. And I'll take a little side trip and talk about why framework and not checklist. Look, I can't give you the recipe. I don't know exactly what it is that it's going to work perfectly for your organization to help you be incredibly successful. But what I do know is that there are probably some things that need to be in the cabinet that you can, different spices, different ingredients, different things that you can draw from the framework essentially to create whatever menu you need to create to be successful. What we've discovered over time in working with organizations, because we've done lots of work with organizations on creating strategy, and we've personally witnessed this gap that's incredibly well documented in the literature. About 75 to 90% of organizations fall short of executing on their strategy and delivering the results that they expect. So we began to look at, okay, what causes that? And it really breaks down into these 7 gears. They're probably maybe, and even that's not perfect. I wouldn't suggest that this is the answer to everything, but the 7 gears probably get you pretty close to the answer. And then you can figure out what the other few things are left that you have to adjust. And so the 7 gears are broken up into 2 categories. The first chunk, the first 3, are what we call the foundation or environment gears. They're really the conditions that create success in an organization. I'll come back and talk about those in a second. And then the second set of gears are what we call the performance gears. And those are the ones that absolutely align the efforts of everybody in the organization to the strategy. Let me talk about the performance gears first, because they're pretty tangible, pretty understandable. Things like set result-oriented goals. When we go into an organization, we often play a game that we call 5-on-5. We might ask leaders to write down the top 5 goals they've got for their team members. And then we ask each of the team members to write down what they think their top 5 goals are. And then so now we've got 2 lists of 5-on-5. And we compare the 2 lists. And what do we find? Well, what we find is only about 40% of the time, and only 2 out of those 5 goals actually align with each other, which means that 60% of the time, team members might be working on things that are not aligned to what their boss thinks they ought to be working on, which are then not aligned to the strategy of the organization. So there's just a huge amount of waste that happens just in that issue around goals. So then the next performance gear is what we call visible scorecards. People play better when their performance matters. And the analogy I always use is, let's say we're driving down the road past a place where kids are playing soccer on 2 fields. And on one field, the kids are keeping score. And on the other field, the kids are not keeping score. How quickly would we be able to look at that and figure out which field was which field? that takes about 30 seconds for most of us. The kids that are on the field where they're keeping score, they're playing with more intensity. They're giving each other feedback. They're working harder because what they're doing matters. The kids that are on the field where they're not keeping score, they could be having a lot of fun, kicking the ball around, and it could be really enjoyable. But the intensity of their performance is going to be dramatically different than where we are keeping score. So everybody needs to have that visible scorecard that tells them how their individual performance or their team performance is versus those goals that we've set. And then the third performance gear is what we call, it's a term we coined called performance drivers, which is around what are the specific behaviors that I need to undertake to hit my goals. And what we've observed is most of the time, there are probably 2 or 3 critical behaviors that really distinguish between good and great, or even average or mediocre and great performance in all walks of life, whether we're talking about salespeople or customer service reps or leaders. There are a lot of things that all of us do, but then there are a few things that really distinguish the great leaders, the great performers, the great customer service reps, the great salespeople from the ones who are doing okay maybe, but not great. So identifying those critical performance drivers and then making sure that the activity goes there. And then the last of the performance gears is around follow-up, follow-through. Now, in follow-up, follow-through is the glue that kind of holds that whole set together. It includes accountability, because people perform better when there's accountability, when I get rewarded and recognized for good and great performance, or when there's some kind of negative consequences for poor performance or for behaving outside the value set of my organization. But there's another part of follow-up, follow-through that's also critical, which is the learning part. We're not going to be perfect every day. And our goals may or may not be right. We may not have the right things in our scorecard. Those things may not be perfectly aligned to the strategy. So before we get to accountability, we need to generate learning. If performance isn't on track, we need to be able to understand why it's not on track. So those 4 gears together, setting result goals, having visible scorecards, identifying the performance drivers, and then having good, consistent follow-up, follow-through, really drive the strategy can drive it to every level of the organization, so that we make sure that what people are doing in and day out contributes as effectively to the strategy as it possibly can.
Well, as you're talking, I start thinking about a gear, imagery of gears. All those gears are not the same size, and there's a reason for that, right? Because they actually, some things have to turn faster than others.
Right.
Some are just harder to turn overall. Ultimately, getting down to your outcome as being the results. So, right. Why gears?
Why gears? It's a great question. And when I first started building the framework, I had the ideas, but I didn't have them in this gear construct. And to be frank, I struggled with it. Man, we had pyramids and we had different kinds of orbital planets around a solar system kind of a thing. And then all of a sudden one day, I had this kind of blinding flash of the obvious. Maybe it was a little bit of an epiphany, a little minor epiphany of they really feel more like gears in a chain connecting strategy to results in a set of gears. And then the more I thought about it, and the more I shared the concept with lots of different people that were more engineering and technical oriented and people that were more artistic. And I thought the artists were going to puke on the idea of gears, right? It's all mechanical, it's all engineering, and everybody got it quickly. And the thing that we like about the gears is, first of all, they all work together. All of them, if you really want optimal execution and driving real results, they all need to work together well. They all need to be well lubricated. None of them can have any sand in the gears. And so that kind of metaphor of let's get all the gears working together and we'll speed execution was really kind of attracting. But the other thing is, if I have 7 gears in chain, if I improve one gear a little bit, then the whole chain gets a little bit better. And what really struck me, and I've spent a good portion of the last 33 years working with organizations on pretty broad-based transformational change. What really struck me was what that means is I don't have to come to work every day trying to fix 7 gears. I can come to work today and try to figure out the gear that is causing the most friction, has the most sand, is the least well lubricated, and I can fix that and will be better tomorrow or next week or next month because I fixed 1 gear. I don't have to think about 7 at once. I can think about 1 or 2. And then maybe I've got 1 gear that if I just do a little bit of work on it, we get a lot better quickly. But then there's some other gears, and I often think about, we haven't really talked about the foundation gears yet, but the one about aligning system structures and process, aligning the organizational architecture. That one is complex and can be difficult. So I can make lots of improvements on other gears while I sort out how do I make sure that my organizational architecture is completely aligned on the strategy. That one's going to take a little bit longer. But at the same time, I'm better because I've been working on other gears in parallel. So so when we kind of thought all the way through, it was like, you know what, this gear thing actually makes a lot of sense. And so that's how we ended up with 7 gears that drive strategy to results.
Well, and I think just to make sure we complete this, I think the other environmental gear that you may have mentioned was the culture of communication. And so when I start thinking about all of these gears, and you mentioned, we talked about grease and sand and all of that, is how do organizations, maybe even just individuals, unintentionally throw sand in the gears?
In hundreds of ways. I'll give you one, and because you brought up the culture of communication. This one happened way early in my career, way back when I was at Pacific Gas and Electric, and it was one of the things that kind of led me to there's just got to be a better way to lead organizations, because at PG&E we had great people. We had the most talented, best people in the utility industry. And we had incredibly well-intended, smart executives. And one of the things I noticed over the arc of my 7 years there was I could talk to frontline people about what the challenges they were facing. And they would talk about, trying to serve customers and getting the bureaucracy out of our way and creating the most value that we possibly can for customers, which then really creates value for the company. But it's really hard for us to do that. And then, a week later, I might be talking to an executive who would say really fundamentally the same things. They would talk about the need to be more efficient. We need to get better return to shareholders. And how we do that is if we take care of our customers better, we'll be better off. Everything's going to work better. So the messages were really the same, but they were completely disconnected from each other. And I coined it at the time. We call this the marshmallow layer. It's this like soft, squishy layer of mass in an organization where nobody is intentionally not communicating, but unintentionally, the energy of what the executive saw and what they were trying to drive through the organization never penetrated the marshmallow layer. And then on the other side, what the frontline people saw and what they were trying to share and where they were saying their struggles were and where they felt like they needed help, it never got back through the other side of the marshmallow. And so completely unintentionally, you've got all this friction in that culture of communication gear. Nobody intended for it to happen. It just does.
So as you were saying, marshmallow layer, I started thinking marshmallow management. It's the management of it, right? That's, and I think that's where the gears and the framework comes into play. It's, how do we actually, chew up the marshmallow so that we can take some of those frontline insights that we're capturing with that top level, intent, and making sure that those things are flowing through well. So that's great imagery. So for me, and I think we all need to have that type of imagery in order for us to stay focused. Now, but when you talk about gears, and you start talking about simple things and you start talking about difficult things, how can I easily grease the wheel or grease the
Okay.
wheel?
Yeah, the one that I always tell people to start with is that game that we talked about a few minutes ago around playing 5-on-5. I mean, if you want rapid improvement, if you want rapid or at least rapid insights to where your gaps are, play 5-on-5. Everybody can do it literally after they've stopped listening to this podcast. They can go start playing that game and make some decisions to better align what the team members are doing to what the strategy of the organization is, and be better tomorrow. And so that's where we always start. And so you think about that. You think about how well do people know how they're performing. You know, I walk into organizations a lot of times, and the question we'll ask is, how are you performing? And people will say, I don't know. And I'll say, well, then their second sentence will be, I think I'm doing okay. And I'll say, well, why do you think you're doing okay? Because I'm not getting in any trouble. What they don't pull out is their visible scorecard that says, look, as a salesperson, my goal is to grow my territory from 100,000 units to 150,000 units by the end of 2020. And here we are sitting in, September or October or August, and here's where I am. I'm either on track or I'm not on track. They rarely, maybe with salespeople, but rarely with other people, do we get to see those kind of visible scorecards where people are on track. And so just making sure that people are on track and that they know where they are performing relative to whatever the goals are after you've aligned on the goals. Those couple things right there, they can make huge improvement quickly. And then that also begins to give you some insights into where are the other problems? What are the other barriers? If we've cleaned those things up, we can start seeing which other gears may have more friction in them that might be a little bit more complicated to solve.
Well, and as you're saying that, I start thinking about, for us on the show and for our Fast Leader Legion, we're talking about improving and impacting the customer experience. And so when I think about all of these gears, which of these gears are going to make that most significant impact on the customer experience? Because from my biased opinion is we got to do those first.
Yes, right. And you may, but if you just think about goals and scorecard, you can work on those first and make a lot of progress. And then that gives you some insights into some of the things that may actually be bigger, greater leverage points, depending upon where your organization's at. So gear one in the foundation gears, we call it right people in the right roles with the right capabilities. Ultimately, to be super successful, you got to have the right people. Sometimes that means you have to go back and think about what value set, what culture do we really want to have that's going to connect our strategy to results, which then may force you to think about what's our value set and how does it shape the culture that we have. And so do we have to do some work on our core values? And if we haven't been recruiting people that fit the core values that are going to drive the culture, well, we may have to go back and rethink who we're hiring and what we're looking for. That can get pretty complicated. It's a huge lever. Man, you want to talk about a gear that if you move it, if you need to move it and you move it, well, you're going to get incredible improvements in results. But it also takes some time to work on, right? And it's more complicated and it takes some work to work through. So while it might be the biggest lever, it's not necessarily the one that gives you the quickest win.
Well, and I think that's it. I mean, especially when you start talking about a, forced COVID transformation, everybody mentions the whole VUCA, volatile, unpredictable, right, all of that stuff. So, I mean, speed, it is an issue. Agility is an issue.
Right.
Being able to pivot fast, is an issue. And you even mentioned it yourself, those companies that were a little bit struggling and weak. And, when they had the forced change occur, they can't survive it. They just can't. They either become an acquisition or a dinosaur.
Right. Exactly. Right.
So when we start talking about, timing, timelines, I mean, you talked about the gardens, and that was an 18-month, turnaround. That's pretty fast.
That was fast.
That is. So, the people thing, the whole going through and looking at right. I mean, to me, gosh, even in today's world, when you start thinking about, I have new needs that I didn't have before. I mean, the world's changed, the customer expectation has changed, the way we serve customers, all these different factors come in. So has the opportunity to have the 18th month turnarounds in a situation like this gone away? I mean, are those not going to happen anymore?
No, I think they can absolutely happen. Look, it depends on kind of the gap in the challenge that you face, how big that gap actually is, right? Like, we do live in an incredibly fast world, but that doesn't necessarily mean that everything happens overnight. And so, when you think about the gears, there are things that we can do quickly that get some improvement, which then buy us the space and the latitude to make some of those longer, harder changes that take place over a period of time. There are relatively few organizations that today, if they don't start making investments, are going to fall off the edge of the cliff tomorrow. And that's really a radically different kind of a transformation anyhow. If we think about most of those 75 to 90% that are coming up short on delivering results, I'm going to bet 50% of them, 60% of them, if we start chipping away today, they've got the time and the space to break the doom loop before they crash and burn completely.
Well, and as you're saying that, I start thinking about something that I heard not too long ago, is that at least at individuals, and I have to suspect, since an organization is just a group of those, is that oftentimes we grossly overestimate what we can accomplish in a year, and then we grossly underestimate what we can accomplish in 10.
That's a great saying. I like that. That's yeah, absolutely. And I would grossly underestimate what we can accomplish in 10. I would say we grossly underestimate what we can accomplish in 3 or 5. Right. The people that do organizational development, all the professor types that I've learned from over the years, they would tell you that it takes 7 years to make a major cultural transformation in an organization. I'm not sure I buy that. I think I think we way underestimate what we can accomplish in a 1 or 2 or 3 year period if we put our minds to it and we're focused on what it is that we have to change. You mentioned when I was at Perrier Group of America and what we did there. The company had been built through a series of acquisitions. And when I first joined the company, we found 83 separate cultures spread across our operations in North America. The company was growing exponentially fast. And we knew at that particular point in time, Coca-Cola and Pepsi had not entered the bottled water space. But we knew that sometime in the future that they were going to do that. And we also knew that because we had those 83 separate cultures that ranged from incredibly great, where anybody would want to work, to really pretty horrible that nobody should want to work in, we knew that we weren't prepared to compete against that. We didn't have the depth of leadership talent. We didn't have a consistent culture that was predictable, that we could hire the talent we needed to be able to be successful. Our business was literally doubling year over year. We didn't have the people to be able to support that kind of exponential growth for an extended period of time that would have allowed us to be competitive. So we didn't know what the time frame was. We just knew it was fast. And while we were in it, it seemed like it took forever. But it was really probably 18 months to 2 years before we could see the green shoots of the culture that we were trying to create, that allowed us to attract talent, that allowed our leaders to be far more effective leaders, that really, we went from 83 disparate cultures to one much more highly consistent culture. As what people were telling us would take 7 years to do, we managed to get it done in 18 months, probably 18 to 24 months, just by being completely focused on making all of the changes that we had to make. And actually, a lot of it was things we talk about in Gear 2 in the book around aligning the organizational architecture, getting the systems, the structures, the processes, and the culture right. We were mono-focused on, I didn't call it that then. It wasn't anywhere, I had no thought in those years about gears. but that's what we were doing. And by aligning those things and getting the organizational architecture right, man, we sped through the process way faster than anybody smart would have predicted that we would get through it.
Well, even as you're talking, I start thinking about where we are right now, and we're still working through all of this, COVID impact and forced change, and the vulnerable becoming even more vulnerable, but then the stronger will become even more stronger. So that leads me to thinking that the merger and acquisition activity that we're getting ready to see an explosion in it. So when we start talking about that, I could be one of those organizations that now all of a sudden has 28 different cultures.
Right.
So how can I prepare myself for the pending M&A activity?
Oh, that's a wide-ranging question there. So part of it is you in any, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I'm an M&A expert by any stretch of the imagination, though we've certainly been around it quite a bit, and we've helped people through these transitions. One is recognizing up front what the differences in culture are, and in making the M&A decisions. Are the cultures, the organizations you're combining, obviously you're doing that strategically, but are their cultures a reasonable fit, or is it reasonable to think that they can fit together and complement each other, and they're just not so dramatically different that they're never going to work together, right? So that would be one thing. Obviously in M&A, we always think about what's this acquired company going to do for us, but the other side of it that I think is actually more important is, what are we as the acquiring company going to do for the acquirer? What do we bring that's going to help make that acquisition more valuable than it would be if they continued as a standalone company, right? And so if you're thinking through those things, then if you're thinking through the cultural fit pieces up front before you do the acquisition, and think about how we might bring these cultures together, and you think about what value do we bring to this organization we're about to acquire, then I think it makes that transition a little bit smoother and better than it would otherwise be.
Well, and even for me, when you start talking about all that, I often say that the innocent victim in all of that is really the customer. So I have a customer that was being served by one, served by another, and now my experience is different because of this bringing together of these cultures, which ultimately do flow through to the customer. How do we make sure, because I know you talked about, hey, what is this company bringing to me, and what is that company providing, and this, that, and the other, but really it's the customer that, like I said, it's the innocent victim. How can we guard that?
Right. Well, I think you almost answered the question. We recognize that one of the companies is serving the customer, the other company is serving the customer. What we need to do is have that explicit conversation of, here's where we are today. Here's what we've got two different entities that are serving the same customer. What do we want that customer experience to look like in the future that brings value to the customer? Not brings value to us, but brings value to the customer. And then as we merge these two entities together, or three or four, how do we merge them together with the idea that the customer is going to be better off for us having done this?
Well, okay. So now we talked about timelines and time horizons and things like that. And one of the things that has come, to my purview after, talking to all these different experts and people who are practitioners and, some of those academics that you were talking about, is that oftentimes people don't look out far enough, and it negatively impacts their ability to be innovative. So let me explain this a little bit more. A lot of times people only look at that 3 to 5 year time window when we start looking at executing. And they think that is a purpose and visionary plan. But in fact, what it is people say that it's a glorified operational plan. So how can I prevent myself from focusing on creating a glorified operational plan, because I'm only looking 3 to 5 years out, to being an organization that really needs to look 10 years out in order to be disruptive and be more innovative?
Right. It's a great paradox, Jim. And I think what you do is you start by looking 10 years out, or you look 15 years out, or you look 20 years out. Now, none of us should be so naive that if we sit here and think about, here we are sitting here in 2020, I'm going to look 10 years out, and here's what the world's going to look like in 2030, right? Our chances of being able to predict that and being accurate are as close to zero as they possibly can be. But if I do look out and think about what do we want this to look like in 30 years or in 10 years or 15 years, what's my vision? That begins to create an anchor that pulls us toward that. And then I can work back to what's the roadmap that we might need to be on to get to that place that I envision we want to be 10 years from now. And interestingly, I'm almost laughing. It's like you've been in my office. We've got a client that we're working with where we're going through exactly that conversation. And the business that they're in, if they try to focus on just the next 3 to 5 years, they will absolutely miss the huge opportunities that await them 10 or 15 years out. And so they really do have to take that long view and then bring it back to, okay, what do we need to do today to get positioned for that? Recognizing we are in that VUCA world, or what I call the world of perpetual whitewater. There are going to be so many changes. We may have the roadmap. We need to have some off ramps. We need to have some accelerator, high speed lanes. Depending upon how the circumstances evolve, you might decide you need to take an off ramp, that you need to reposition those assets and your capital in some other way, your talent in some other way, or the opportunities may present themselves that you need to accelerate, and that 10-year vision all of a sudden becomes your 4-year operational plan, because the opportunity you get that opportunity and you need to take advantage of it when it presents itself. Right.
Okay. So what we've just talked about there, and going that forward and coming back, is I've had discussions about this, and I call that retrospective engineering. Okay. So in other words, throw it out there. It's 10 years. Now let's, roll it back in order to see how we actually can use that as, that waypoint that you're talking about.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's a great way to think about it.
Okay. So, gosh, needless to say, this is hard work. I mean, you state it several times in the book. This is not as simple as here's your framework, convert it into a checklist, boom, 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 things are going to be rosy. This is not the case. So we need inspiration in order to keep us going and focused and energized and motivated. And one of the things that we look at on the show are quotes to help us do that. Is there a quote or two that you like that you can share?
Well, my favorite these days, and it struck me yesterday. I was on a different call with somebody. The old Henry Ford quote of, if you always do, or at least it's attributed to Henry Ford, if you always do what you've always done, you're going to get what you've always got. To that, I would add, if you always think the way you've always thought, you're going to do what you've always done, so you're going to get what you've always got. So the real key to be different is think differently. Challenge goes back to the beginning of our conversation. Challenge in those mental models, the thinking, the assumptions, the beliefs, perceptions.
Oh, I love that. Okay, so but there's times, and I think you've even discussed this at several points, where you've iterated. You things became more visible. You put all these different elements together. You've gotten to the point where the 30 years of work that you've done have now culminated in this book, right? It takes a while. Right. And we have a lot of learnings and things that happen along the way that help us to make decisions, we hope. And we learn from others. We talk about getting over the hump on the show. Is there a time where you've gotten over the hump that you can share?
Wow, there've been so many. One that I would share is early in my career, back in Pacific Gas and Electric, they did this crazy thing. I have a huge amount of respect for PG&E. I didn't respect this decision at all. I was 26 years old, and they put me in charge of an engineering group of 35 people. The 33 technical professional people, the engineers and estimators, had all been at PG&E longer than I'd been alive. I was 26 years old. They'd all been at PG&E longer than 26 years. I can't respect that decision because I can't imagine what PG&E was actually thinking. But the epiphany was, as a leader, there's nothing that I can do technically, functionally, that is going to be better than what my team does. The worst thing I can possibly do is to dictate any decision around engineering. And I can't even pretend like I can fool these people. So I had to think through, what is it that I bring to the table? What value do I add that nobody else adds? And what I realized was we were in the middle of a massive transformation, and I needed the team to get more focused on delivering great outcomes for customers. But they needed me to create space for them to be able to do that. And what I found was it was like the perfect trade. If I created space, if I got the bureaucracy out of their way, if I helped them be incredibly successful at what they wanted to do, what they were passionate about, then in turn, we could make the pivot to get more focused on customers. And so it really just forced me to think, what's my role as a leader? And what do I bring to this table when I can't actually tell anybody to do anything of substance?
I think that's excellent insight. And you're learning it and being able to come to that conclusion at such a early age is, I think, why you were in that position. Okay, so when you start looking at where you are now, all these things that you've built, you talked even earlier about getting this out, to more organizations so we don't have this 75 to 90%, failure of execution rate. I have to imagine you have some goals in place. Is there one of those goals that you can share?
Right now, today, most short term, one of the things we advocate in the book, we're trying to build this community of what we call gearheads. People who are as excited about, and there's so many implications in the book about creating great places where people can work, engaging people, letting people bring their best selves to work every day. And then really through that, delivering the great results for the organization. And so we're trying to build this community of gearheads where the people are as passionate about it and want to create great organizations the way we do, will come together and all learn from each other. So, my short-term goal, and maybe in some ways, crazy, goofy goal, is to get more and more people coming into the community and really joining in. Let's all learn from each other about how we really drive strategy to results and create great places for people to work.
And the Fast Leader Legion wishes you the very best. Now, before we move on, let's get a quick word from our sponsor. An Even Better Place to Work is an easy-to-use solution that gives you a continuous diagnostic on employee engagement along with integrated activities that will improve employee engagement and leadership skills in everyone. Using this award-winning solution is guaranteed to create motivated, productive, and loyal employees who have great work relationships with their colleagues and your customers. To learn more about An Even Better Place to Work, visit beyondmorale.com/better. All right, here we go, Fast Leader Legion. It's time for the Hump Day Hoedown. Okay, Sean, the Hump Day Hoedown is the part of our show where you give us good insights fast. So I'm going to ask you several questions. And your job is to give us robust yet rapid responses that are going to help us move onward, upward, faster. Sean, Ryan, are you ready to hoe down?
I'll see if I can do it. Yeah, I'll give my best shot here, Jim. Let's go.
All right. So what is holding you back from being an even better leader today?
Oh, me. My thinking, I'm no different than anybody else. My thinking gets in my way, and getting the right people around me to help me accomplish what I want to accomplish is really the constraints to my growth.
And what is the best leadership advice you have ever received?
Let's see. Keep smiling.
And what is one of your secrets that you believe contributes to your success?
I think it's a combination of two things. It's the creativity to solve problems and the persistence that we don't stop until we get them solved.
And what is one tool that you believe helps to contribute in your success personally and professionally?
I think pretty much just being able to listen to people as empathetically as I possibly can.
And what would be one book you'd recommend to our Legion? It could be from any genre. And of course, we're going to put a link to Get in Gear on your show notes page as well.
Sure. I would recommend, because leaders are having to deal with so much change in their environment, the one of the great books about leading, influencing individual change is Carrie Patterson and Joseph Grenny's book, Influencers.
Okay, Fast Leader Legion, you can find links to that and other bonus information from today's show by going to fastleader.net/Sean Ryan. Okay, Sean, this is my last Hump Day Hoedown question. Imagine you've been given the opportunity to go back to the age of 25 and you have the knowledge and skills that you have now, and you can take those back with you, but you can't take it all. You can only choose one. So what skill or piece of knowledge would you take back with you and why?
You don't need to be perfect. Early at the age of 25, I thought everything had to be about perfection. And that really challenged blocked my own thinking in terms of being able to listen to other people, hear the advice, feedback that people were giving me. And now knowing that really it's about the relentless pursuit of being better every day would change completely how I approach stuff back in those days.
Sean, I had fun with you today. Can you please share with the Fast Leader Legion how they can connect with you?
Absolutely. The best way to connect with us is at our website, wwici.com.
Sean Ryan, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom, and the Fast Leader Legion honors you and thanks you for helping us get over the hump. Thank you for joining me on the Fast Leader Show today. For recaps, links from every show, special offers, and access to download and subscribe, if you haven't already, head on over to fastleader.net so we can help you move onward and upward faster.